Okay, welcome back to This Week in Global Health. This week we're talking about neglected tropical diseases. We've talked about these things before, but this week we've got two very special guests, and I'm really excited to hear from them tonight, or today, depending on where in the world you are right now. Neglected tropical diseases, these are diseases, many of them you wouldn't have heard of before. I mean, these things go by names like leishmaniasis, schistosomiasis, echinococcus, I can't even say the word. Anyway, they've all got...
Blundering already, Greg, blundering.
I actually wonder if this isn't the reason that they've been neglected. Like, people just can't say the words.
They're hard.
Anyway, so neglected tropical, including rabies. I can say rabies. Schistosomiasis, that's one I can say. These neglected tropical diseases, they're really important. I'm going to ask the panel members if they'll just quickly introduce themselves. We'll start off with Jessica and Chris, because you guys know them. Just quickly, Jessica, who are you? Where are you? What are you talking about tonight?
Hey everybody, I am Jessica Taff, and I am coming to you from the Washington, D.C. metro area, and I'm so excited to be talking NTDs with this great panel. I'm going to be asking exactly what is the neglected tropical diseases, what diseases are included in that. I'm going to be asking about some of the challenges and ways of integrating them into other public health approaches for these diseases.
Thanks very much, Jessica. Chris, over to you. Who are you? Where are you? And what are you talking about tonight?
Hi everybody, I am Chris Ronson, and I am joining tonight's Twig episode from Kyiv in Ukraine. Today I will again also be talking NTDs with our special guests, but more focused on the corporate role in the fight against NTDs and challenges that we see ahead.
Thanks very much. And a very special guest, Ken. Ken, can you tell us who you are and where you work, and a little bit about your background?
Hi, I'm Ken Gustafson with Merck, the pharmaceutical company. I'm in the U.S. Outside of the U.S., we operate as MSD, and I'm part of Merck's corporate responsibility team, where, among other things, I work on our neglected tropical disease programs and access to medicines and healthcare in the developing world.
Thanks very much, Ken. And last but not least, Don. Don, could you talk to us about who you are and where you're from?
Hi there. So my name's Don Bundy, and I'm in the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in Seattle. Before this, I worked with the World Bank, and before that, I was in academia. And I want to talk this evening, or this afternoon, or this morning about what are some of the challenges and some of the positives around dealing with the neglected tropical diseases.
Okay, so we've got some exciting content ahead of us. I'm really looking forward to hearing all about this. I think we're going to jump in. Jessica, you're going to jump in with a question to Don?
Yeah, that's right. I think the very first thing that we need to do for our audience is to define what neglected tropical diseases are. A lot of people have heard them probably shortened to NTDs, but don't know that these actually cover a whole bunch of diseases. Don, could you tell us a little bit just about the whole range of diseases that they cover, how and why they got grouped together? Because this was actually, as I recall, a movement to get more attention to them by grouping them that way.
Okay, well, great question, Jessica, because these are, as you say, people misunderstand what where the term comes from. So neglected diseases sounds like it's the diseases that are neglected. So a lot of people think it's the appendix for Manson's tropical diseases, you know, all those horrible diseases that we all learnt about, or at least that we read about, where there are relatively few cases and they're rare and so forth. Those are not the neglected tropical diseases as we perceive them. The neglected tropical diseases are actually diseases of neglected people. These are diseases that are present in the poor populations of the world and really shouldn't be. These are diseases very often that we've got rid of from middle income countries or from better off people in poor countries. These are diseases that shouldn't be there anymore. They do have all these strange names and horrible consequences that Greg mentioned. If we go to the WHO list, there's a list of 17 or more diseases that are considered to be neglected tropical diseases. If we go to the London Declaration, I'm going to talk a bit more about that, of donated medicines for diseases, that's a shorter list of 10 diseases. But these aren't rare diseases. These are diseases that affect 1.8 billion people in this world. So they're also diseases for which we can really do something and which something is really happening. So it's not that they're still neglected, but we need to make sure those neglected people get attention.
Thanks, Don. I'm really glad that you brought up that, the fact that it's neglected people and not just neglected diseases, because I think that has so much to do with how we approach these diseases in terms of finding funding to get them and getting access to medicines, and also addressing other issues that I know we'll talk about later, like poverty.
Thanks very much, Jessica. And I'm going to jump in with a question to Ken. Ken, you've used the term corporate social responsibility, and we're going to hear a bit more from you about what the pharma industry is doing. But could you just, in a nutshell, define corporate social responsibility? What is that? Talk to us about what is corporate social responsibility for people that might not know.
Yeah, well, I would even change that word and just refer to it simply as corporate responsibility and pull the social word out, although the social element is incorporated in the definition a little bit. So when we talk about corporate responsibility at my company and many other companies, we talk partly about what we do as a company, but more about how we do it. And so corporate responsibility often gets confused or merged with philanthropy. And while philanthropy is usually a portion of corporate responsibility, they're not one and the same. So corporate responsibility refers to how a company brings the best that it has to offer throughout its company, throughout its operations, to address issues like the environment, ethics, engaging and supporting employees, and for the purposes of this discussion, especially from the healthcare sector, how we think about access to healthcare, access to medicine. And so our corporate responsibility would be looking across the spectrum of what we do, from research and development to working with our employees and through our employees, and sometimes direct philanthropy in terms of engaging with the issue of access to healthcare, access to medicine.
Excellent. Now, to follow up on that really quickly, Ken, you work for Merck, as you mentioned in the introduction, and the global health area is filled with multiple disciplines, and we know what certain organizations and companies are doing within global health. How would you describe pharma's role, maybe specifically even Merck's role, in the fight against neglected tropical diseases?
Well, for innovative healthcare companies, as the company I work for is, our main role is to discover, develop, and bring to people innovative medicines, innovative vaccines, innovative diagnostic tools that can address pressing healthcare needs. And so within that spectrum of researching and developing and delivering, that's where our spot is. So looking at what are the healthcare needs in the world and then figuring out how we can innovate and develop and deliver the medicines that are needed to address them.
Talking about the neglected tropical diseases, we'll see how people are trying to build on that story, not just for river blindness, but for many of the other diseases too.
Don, I think that's such a great example. I love that story with ivermectin. And so it's a great example of public-private partnerships, PPPs as I'm used to seeing them. Really good with the acronyms. But I was wondering, would you, and let me also ask Ken about it, do you guys see that also as an example of corporate responsibility? Because certainly pharma had to be involved and donated all of this medicine to the impoverished world.
Yeah, so I
leave that to you, Jen. To you, Ken. Yep.
Thank you. So I think it is an example of corporate responsibility, and what I would add is that while in the case of the medicine that Don was mentioning and the river blindness program, we have been donating, my company has been donating that medicine for the past 28 years. And it's a great example of that philanthropic activity. We've donated well over 2 billion treatments of that medicine over the past 28 years. But at the same time, echoing some of what Don was saying, we saw that part of our corporate responsibility, not simply donating the medicine, but working with different partners to make sure that we were donating and we are continuing to donate that medicine within an infrastructure that is capable to deliver it, capable to monitor how the drug is being used, and capable of setting targets and goals towards the eventual control and elimination of this disease. And Merck is not alone in this approach. There are many other big pharmaceutical companies that are involved in neglected tropical disease programs that are structured around the donation of a medicine, but at the same time, those companies are very actively engaged with a lot of the partners that Don mentioned to make sure that there is a framework and an infrastructure in place within which those products can be delivered. And I think that's a very important part of the corporate responsibility component. It's not simply donating and walking away, but it's actually staying involved to bring our expertise across the range of our business to help the program be successful.
Maybe I can just jump in there and make just expand that response a little bit and say that in 2012, 14 pharmaceutical companies got together, and I don't want to make Ken blush, but I, in a sense, followed on the lead from Merck in making donations for the 10 neglected tropical diseases that they, in the so-called London Declaration, they declared that they would provide treatment for those through at least 2020. And we're talking about treatment for 1.8 billion people, and the value of that is probably around $17 billion between now and 2020. So hugely important donation. If we can deliver those drugs, I mean, imagine the leverage we get for just for the cost of delivering them. We provide $17.5 billion worth of medicines to the poorest countries in the world. It's extraordinary.
It would be a truly incredible endeavor. And before we move on to the next question, actually, I want to thank you both for, Dawn, you actually said a lengthy answer, but I think you both really beautifully summarized this very intricate and complicated dance between the public sector and the private sector in the delivery and procurement and all of those different phases and stages that are a part of getting necessary drugs to the populations who are neglected or who require them. So very well done, well put. And my other point is that I want Greg to try to pronounce the actual name of the river blindness disease. Can we give it a go?
Is it onchocerciasis?
Oh.
Did he get it? Okay. The one time.
I spent a lot of time at medical school learning to pronounce strange names. Bushirarium and crofty and Diphyllobothrium latum. So onchocerciasis is easy.
You can't ever get my name right, so I thought I'd try this.
That's right, Christopher. I must say, just to follow on what you were saying, Chris and Don, about PPPs and the fact that buying the drugs is one part of it, but the reason you need these partnerships is to get drugs into the hands of people. As Chris was saying, you need procurement, you need demand forecasting and quantification, you need procurement, you need shipping, you need warehousing, you need distribution, you need inventory management. There's so many bits and pieces, so many moving parts that need to be in place in order to make sure that people actually get treatment. You need multiple actors, including the public sector, that provide a lot of that distribution and inventory management and warehousing, et cetera, et cetera. But okay, that's my little 5 cents worth. Chris, I believe you had another question for Don.
I do. Well, I have a question actually for both Don and Ken, because you're coming from two very distinct but interesting and engaged sectors within global health. What are the challenges in the eradication of NTDs as you see them currently, or the next things that we're going to have to overcome to really be effective in fighting them?
Don, why don't you take that first?
So I was going to respond to this actually also to pick up on Greg's perspective that he presented there, talking about the importance of the supply chain, all the pieces that had to be in place in order for those medicines to get out there. I mean, if you think of the supply chain in terms of just getting the medicines to some of these countries and then getting them across the border and getting them into the pharmacies, which that's what we call the first mile in the way we talk about this, and amazingly, the pharmaceutical companies pay for all of that. They get them into the pharmacies in the countries. That's where they deliver them to. It's believe me, that first mile is a long mile, so that's a tough one to do. But then, of course, the real challenge then is getting them from there to the people who really need them, and this is a huge ask. And one of the great successes in the NTD area was the recognition that you can actually help countries create a community health system that delivers these medicines. And the basis of that system is the community itself. It's asking the community, I'm just going to sort of summarize it very briefly here. It's a very complicated process, difficult to understand anthropologically as well. But what you have to do is you have to get the community to want this. The community has to need this, and the community has to identify people within the community who they trust to take a lead on this. And you know, these folks, and I can recall that on the river blindness program they had 480,000 of these people throughout Africa, and each one of these was a person who would accept the pills on behalf of the community, and then go around house to house saying, look, it's the time of year when we need to treat ourselves, here they are. And because it's somebody from the community, people would trust them. And that process has remained in place and been effective over several decades. Now that's an extraordinary thing, and in many societies that kind of healthcare system, that kind of community-based system, is the only system that's reaching poor people. In fact, in the Ebola crisis, many I'm sure that you read a great deal about that, but one of the features that really didn't come out was that in Liberia and Sierra Leone in particular, when people looked around and said, who can help us as community volunteers to deal with this terribly difficult problem, around funerals, around dealing with cadavers and so forth, who can help us? It was actually these community workers from the NTD programs that they turned to, and they recruited those in very large numbers. And so the challenge nevertheless will continue to remain how we can ensure that those medicines don't just end up in the capital cities, but get right out to the end of the road and deep into the communities.
Very much so. Very much.
And Ken, any thoughts from your side as to what the challenges are going forwards to address neglected tropical diseases?
Yeah, let me just add one point to Don's very good point about the supply chain itself. The first thing is that we know that these diseases can be eliminated. So in the case of river blindness or onchocerciasis, already several countries in Latin America have eliminated the disease. And when I use the word elimination here, I'm talking about being able to stop treatment with the medicine that was being used, and having the World Health Organization come in and verify that the transmission of the disease has been stopped, no new people are getting the disease, and there's no risk of the disease coming back. And so we know that that's possible. One of the big challenges with doing that, especially compared to Latin America, to the African context, when the areas are much larger, you've got much larger populations being treated. As you get closer to elimination, ironically, it becomes more difficult to know exactly where to treat, who to treat, and for how long you need to treat, because that's a spot where you can't get it wrong. Because if you stop too soon, or if you stop in a place where you need to keep going, the disease will come back. And so something that the Gates Foundation and other partners have been working very, very energetically on is the mapping of these diseases, making sure we understand exactly where the diseases are, where are the people that need to be treated, to make sure that we don't miss any pockets of the disease, so that when we do reach the point when we can stop treatment, that we know that we can do it safely, and we know the disease won't come back. And so that mapping and identifying where the disease still exists is really an important step as we get closer to elimination.
Absolutely.
You guys both for those comments, and then the challenges. And I think what's really salient to me from what you said, and interesting to point out to our audience, is that it's not just about developing the drugs, it's also about getting them to people. And I think what you've said is that goes beyond just the research and development that takes in the science. It's also about these public health approaches and the components of those systems that functioning health systems to get it to them. So thanks for saying that, because I think that's it's an entire process, that it's not just one step. All of these components need to be functioning properly.
Yeah, and I suppose another thing that's worth mentioning that we haven't really talked about, and I'll just throw it in there, is that addressing a lot of these problems isn't just about drugs and treatment and diagnostics. It's often about poverty and cleanliness and access to just sanitation and clean water, and there's so many bits and pieces that need to be in place for people to be well and healthy. I'm going to end with just one quick question to Don, because I know he knows about this and I don't, and I'm very keen to hear about it. Don, the Ross Fund, what is it? I'm desperate to know.
Okay, so Ronald Ross was the guy who became a Nobel laureate for discovering that that mosquitoes transmit malaria, and that was he got the Nobel Prize for Medicine for that discovery. So the UK government decided they were going to set up a fund called the Ross Fund that was going to be dealing with deadly diseases, some of the most important diseases in the world. That's what they decided to do, and they decided to make this a substantial fund and put £1 billion, £1 billion, so that's like $1.5 billion into this fund. And somewhere along the road, they got in touch with Bill Gates, and Bill said he would also contribute to the fund. In fact, he would, through the foundation, that there would be a matching to work together on that. So overall, we envisage this as a $3 billion US dollar overall investment. But I want to emphasize that this really did come out of the UK government's thinking. And what was that thinking about? It was that there are diseases now in this world that we can eliminate. There are also diseases in this world, and the Ebola story is an example, where we're scared of pandemics. And we really need to take some serious effort to address both of those things. So the Ross Fund is intended to advance the pandemic preparedness. So that means both setting up systems to react to pandemics, to react more quickly and more effectively in the future to pandemics, but also to develop vaccines and other tools. So there's a research side to respond to some of these emerging disease issues. At the same time, to tackle some of the long-term issues that we've really not got to grips with. And malaria is a big piece of that. Why aren't we trying to eradicate malaria? Why aren't we eliminating malaria? We know we're not really going to tackle child mortality if we don't get rid of malaria, so it's an issue we need to get to. And secondly, and for purposes of this conversation, very importantly, what about the NTDs? Why aren't we also addressing them in a much more systematic and serious way? So the big piece then, apart from the pandemic preparedness, was these infectious disease areas around malaria, around the neglected tropical diseases, with money for the research side, so looking at new tools and new operational approaches, for the mapping that Ken mentioned, but also for delivery, to stand up a process that will work with these extraordinary donations of medicines and make sure that those are able to reach the poorest people. So that's the concept behind the Ross Fund. It's a very exciting new development, and I'm hoping it'll catalyze a lot of interest and a lot of Me Tooism in the community as we go forward.
That's exciting stuff. And until tonight, I didn't know about the Ross Fund, so this was really, really interesting to me. Thanks very much. I want to just thank Ken and Don for being on the show. You guys really brought so much to the table. And we're going to go really make an effort to make sure that this video goes out and gets out as a podcast and gets seen far and wide, because I think there's some important messages here. So thanks very much to the panel. Thank you for watching. If you're watching this at home, if you're listening on a podcast, thank you for listening. Until next time, don't do drugs. Always do your best. Don't ever change. And remember to share this video or podcast with people that you think might find it interesting. Okay, take care. Bye.
Thank you, Greg.